Good evening, everyone. Dena, innovator in health and wellness, and today is November the 25th, and we're here on a Zoom call with Kevin Annett, and we're going to be discussing Kanata and reclaiming public spaces this evening. So if you're just coming in now, thank you for joining us. We'd ask you to sort of keep your mic muted and your video off during this first part anyway, as it helps keep the quality of the video that we're recording optimal, and also protects your privacy. If you have any questions, if you could just hold them until we're about halfway through the hour and then post them in caps in the chat box, that would be great. We do have some questions that people have sent in advance, so thank you for that too. Your participation really helps us groom the show, so we're grateful that you're here. The past Zoom links are available on our website, and I've posted the website link, Atlantic Common Law, there in the chat box. And so tonight I'm also acting, well, I am, I guess, but I have my convener of the Atlantic Common Law Assembly on in this presentation. I'd just like to start with a quote that was sent in by two of our members, Klaus and Shirley. "We can gain our common ground by inspiring others with the richness of common law. We are the people whose hearts beat a true record of mankind and our right relationship with each other and all of the nations." So thank you again, Klaus and Shirley, for sending in that. It really sort of sets the tone for what we're about to talk about. Before we start, I'd just like to take a moment to do a little eulogy for my friend Sally L. Cordy, who I just found out this morning passed away on November 22nd. So you might remember Sally because she was the one who interviewed Ted Kuntz of Vaccine Choice Canada and Rocco Galati, who's the constitutional lawyer who's taken the, Ontario government to court, fighting for these unconstitutional measures around COVID. So you may have heard me talk about Sally. But I'd just like to read this, and I've lit a candle in her honor because she's really a hero. Kevin, she mentioned you in the interview, actually, when I interviewed with her the first time. So I sent that to you. Thanks. But Sally, I very much value your lifetime work and your vision in a vaccine-free world. In our interview, you talked about being followed and having a few close calls with the pharmaceutical mafia. So you were really a courageous lady to challenge the system on all levels. I believe your sudden, unexplained death is also part of a greater plan. Perhaps others will see the desperation and levels of intelligence that those in the chemical business, portray. Even though I'm very saddened by your physical passing, I trust in eternal love and wisdom. You joined the other hero friends, Jeannie Ohm, Tony Bark, Jeff Bradstreet, and the 90 other holistic doctors who had unexplained sort of untimely passings, researching about and publishing the dangers of vaccines. So you'll meet them, I'm sure, on a higher plane of existence. Your legend and vision of a vaccine-free world is alive and well.
Thanks, Dena.
Thank you. And I'd like to say a prayer. Kevin, I know you're the minister, but
No. Hey, we all are.
But I just felt called to do this tonight too. So I'm going to say, dear God, but if you don't believe in God, you can use love or Elvis or Jesus or Buddha, whoever it is you think is your source of unconditional love. But dear God, thank you for bringing us together in this spiritual awakening. Thank you for the challenges that teach us to own our own power using divine love and wisdom as our only authority. Now that's Severian. For thousands of years, we've accepted a slave victim mentality, allowing these lower vibrations to rule over our body and our mind and our heart. Instead of fearing or resenting the challenges brought before us today, allow us to see it as a gift to developing our own sovereign mind and enhancing our loving hearts. Give us the strength and courage to create a new reality with this unconditional love as our foundation, powered by divine grace and wisdom. In this moment, we are love. We give love, we receive love, and this is the vibration that allows us a healthy life of love and laughter and liberty and the ability to create. So we can gain our common ground by inspiring others with the richness of common law. We are the people whose hearts beat the true record of mankind and our right relationship with God, with each other, and with the nation. And that last piece was written by Klaus and Shirley, who are two members. So thank you for allowing me to do that. I'm really grateful for that opportunity.
Amen.
So what I'd like to first introduce Kevin Annett, who you all know and love well. Kevin was really instrumental in having us develop our common law assembly September 18th. And he's really donated and given a lot of his personal time and his career and his family in bringing this idea of common law really to the world. So thank you, Kevin. And I really appreciate everything that you've done for our assembly and continue to do. Do you have any opening thoughts on reclaiming our public space?
Well, it's, the eulogy you just gave, Dena, is very much in the spirit of what we mean by reclamation, and it isn't simply a physical act.
Right here, look.
It's
common law, common law brothers.
If everyone could just mute and turn off your video, Dylan, that would be great. And I just muted you, I think, Greg, just for the first part, so we can hear Kevin. Okay, Kevin, sorry, go ahead. The eulogy. Kevin, you're muted. Sorry. Can you unmute? There you go.
Oh, how about now? All right.
You're good.
Reclamation is really a spiritual act. It starts within. And in our flag for Kanata, the two blue lines represent the Turo Wampum, and it's a spiritual statement as well. It's about equality and the reclaiming of our own thoughts for ourselves. Now, that's something that we assume a lot of the time is going on. We, the first step towards reclaiming the earth is to reclaim our own mind. That's a harder thing to do than we realize, because even though we think we are thinking for ourselves, we often aren't. We are carrying thoughts around that are being given to us, that we've incorporated. I found out quickly, when you look at the thoughts you have in a day or a week.
The top turns to new music, TikTok, and a certain
Greg, could you unmute, please? Greg Salter. Thank you.
Yeah, I kept getting muted too. I don't know if you can hear me now or not. But.
Yes, thank you. Sorry.
The fact is that in a week, if you examine what we think, we're usually reacting to something or somebody else. And that's evident in a lot of the meetings we have, where people get together and the very first thing people start talking about is all the horrible things that they heard on the news. So we're reacting to somebody else's agenda, and our thoughts are not our own. We can't go about even contemplating reclaiming public space or any of that unless we're operating out of our own thoughts. And so that's a discipline we need to develop concurrently with all of the activity we're going to be talking about today. So that's an important thing to keep in mind. You really can't have one without the other. The Republic of Kanata as a whole is a reclamation. It's us taking back the entire nation. But I'm going to talk about the theory of reclaiming our nation, and then one particular example of how we can go about that, because a lot of the groundwork has already been laid. There are many precedents for this, including legal ones, of how and why we can do this lawfully. Generally speaking, when we talk about reclamation, we're saying that even under the law of the existing Canadian society, anyone has the right to reclaim anything owned by the Crown, including the land, which is all of Canada, buildings, any of that, as reparations due to damages caused by the Crown. That's right in Section 61 of Magna Carta. That's been an enshrined liberty within English common law for over 800 years. Secondly is the fact that we're obligated to do it in a situation where criminality is occurring. People have the obligation not just to perform citizen arrest, but to secure their lives and liberty and secure health of their families and everything. And so there are all these precedents within common law that say, yes, in the same way we have the right to form our own courts or own assemblies, when the government isn't governing or they're governing against our interests, then yes, it's the same thing. We can reclaim public space. Now, all of the arguments brought against it, for example, trespassing, one of the first things you do, let's say, as Dylan suggested the other day, we go into an empty library and just take it over because it's not being used. The very first thing you're hit with is being accused of trespass. Well, illegal trespasses does not go on when this is sometimes called a necessity defense, at least in American court cases. where if there's a higher necessity at work, you can break laws which normally you shouldn't. So for example, in classic cases, there's a house on fire, a child's inside, you can break down the door to get in to save the child. And you're not going to be accused of vandalizing a house for doing that, right? Because there's a higher necessity at work. Same thing here. The nation as a whole requires that, and the situation we're in requires that we start assuming the role of governance ourselves. And that's at the heart of the idea of an assembly, where we're reclaiming governance, the common law court, where we reclaim the law for ourselves, and by extension, how do we reclaim public space? It's just the next step in that, of how we establish a nation. There are nuts and bolts of how to do it. I've been fortunate to be involved in actual reclamations and that with both native and non-native people across Kanata. And the first thing you realize is that how easy it is to do, and how surprisingly supportive people, including the police, will be when you do it in a very respectful and lawful manner, when you consult them. I know yesterday at the Vancouver Assembly meeting, people have decided on, Dena, I think you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it's Sunday, December 16th, there's going to be a big event in Vancouver where we hold this big Christmas event, but as part of that, we're going to be reclaiming various public spaces. And our plan is to notify the police long before it. We're going to invite them for the police to be part of it. So what we're saying to the police is, we want you to assist us in taking about this public space. And we're going to go into the details of that in a minute, where we talk about, a case of how we can apply it. But from the very beginning, we have to show that it's a lawful public act done for the public interest. And that's the whole way. It's not a bunch of people going into, quote, Occupy, which has kind of it's not even an act of civil disobedience, not even a protest. It's doing something that is our right under common law. And that's the framework in which we put this stuff. Now, I'll talk about the precedents for this. There's 3 levels at which we're authorized to do this. There isn't just the general fact of Magna Carta, Section 61, which allows us to seize anything on Crown land as reparations. Now, reparations means you've been harmed in some way. We've been defrauded. We've had genocide committed on us. Our children are being seized. Our rights are being violated. We're living in a police state. We're all owed reparations for that. And so all of our actions can be seen as a way to do that, to balance the scales of this, systematic injustice being done to all of us. But there's 3 levels at which this has happened in our Canadian context. First of all, and I want to lead into the whole thing of one campaign we could do, which would really be very effective in this. You've known, some of the people may not, but a lot of you know, if you go to murderbydecree.com, our very long campaign to expose and prosecute genocide in Canada. Very early on in that campaign, early in the century, West Coast and Central Canadian Native tribes actually authorized us to help them take back the land that had been unlawfully seized by both Crown and state, the state and the church. And the first example of that was on the West Coast in 2008. Capilano, who's the traditional Squamish elder, that's an eviction notice that he actually registered in the BC Supreme Court, docket S036483, March 2008. And what it did was it evicted the Catholic, Anglican, and United churches from Vancouver, all 78 churches, because they never got asked permission to build on his territory. And from those churches, they eradicated about 90% of his people. And so he ordered them off the land. He also authorized me as his legal agent to enforce that eviction order. And that's the basis on which we went into occupied churches. We said, you're illegally trespassing, you've got to get off. If you don't, you can be fined and imprisoned. And that was a lawful notice. Now, what was interesting was when the police showed up, when we were doing that reclamation, when we were occupying the various churches downtown, we just showed them that. And I said, that's a law, that's a court order. That's the law, you have to enforce it. And every time they backed off, because they knew that politically they weren't going to go in and tell the churches to get off the land, but they couldn't contest it because they knew it was lawful. So it was a brilliant moment of education for a lot of people, because it said, look, the cops are serving genocidal institutions. Canada as a whole is genocidal. The stuff happening now, you know, mandatory vaccinations, seizing children, throwing people in jail without cause. That's been going on in the Native world for 150 years and more in Canada, right? And so, you know, we acted on that by saying these churches, first of all, don't have the right to be on our land for having committed those crimes. And non-Native Canadians have the right and the obligation to support that. Otherwise, they're accessory to a crime, you know, by being involved in those churches, paying taxes, the whole bit. That was the first legitimation. The second was the International Common Law Court that was convened in Brussels in July 2012. It brought the first case that forced Pope Benedict to resign, that named Queen Elizabeth, Benedict, Stephen Harper, and 27 other officials of church and state as complicit in these crimes against humanity and covering them up. Now, what came out of that court verdict, and let me just read it, it's up online, but this was the final the verdict of the Common Law Court in February 25th, 2013, right after Ratzinger had resigned, because they knew this was coming down the pipe. We, the jury, consisting of 58 sworn men and women, having considered all of the evidence presented to us in this case, do hereby find all the named defendants guilty as charged on both counts in the indictment. We, the jury, therefore sentence all the named defendants to a prison term of 25 years without possibility of parole, and to a loss of all of their authority, assets, and property. That meant that the Crown of England and the Vatican in these churches, their property is relinquished. They became what in international law is called a TNCO, a transnational criminal organization. And there's a convention on that at the UN passed in 2000 called the Convention on Transnational Criminal Organizations. And it's these churches, whether it's the Church of Rome, Church of England, or the United Church, which is part of it was set up by the Act of Parliament, so it's considered part of the Crown. They're transnational criminal bodies, which means they've laundered or trafficked money, trafficked children, engaged in criminal activity, and committed crimes against humanity. As such, under international law, they forfeited their wealth and property, and their officers can all be arrested. Now, there are arrest warrants that have been issued against all those top people, and there's a case of two of them on Vancouver Island where we're on the verge of arresting them back. Our assembly in Parksville had just ordered a summons for the two of these guys to appear, and then that assembly got blown to pieces, probably as a result of taking that initiative. But the point is that these arrest warrants are lawful. That's why Ratzinger is still hiding out in the Vatican 8 years later. He knows if other courts can act on that and have them arrested. So these have great power. That's the second legitimation we have of you know, seizing the property of these criminal bodies. Now, what that means lawfully in Canada is that any of the churches, the office buildings, the land at their summer camps, any of the lands and properties of any of those churches can lawfully be seized by people. We can go in and non-violently say, you've been evicted, you're convicted criminal bodies, you have to, and we are opening up these buildings as public space to be used, say for our assemblies, for our common law courts. Hell, let's open daycare centers, whatever, right? We can use all of those buildings now lawfully. If they belong to the United Church, the Catholic Church, the Anglican Church, those properties have been forfeited and not only can be claimed, but must be claimed by the people of Kanata under these standing orders, right? And the final point is that the third level of legitimation is, as a republic, one of the bases on which the republic was formed in 2015 was that we need to disestablish the old colonial system of crown rule. And that means if we're going to really, you know, overcome the legacy of genocide, we need a new equal relationship with the people who we tried to exterminate. And that can only happen by, you know, putting our money where the mouth is and not just talking healing, but actually making it happen. And these reclamation actions are one way to show Indigenous people that we're serious, that we are not going to let these criminal bodies continue to operate. Because don't forget, we're not talking about just crimes of the past. One of the things we talked about yesterday is that Holy Rosary Cathedral, the main cathedral that we occupied in downtown Vancouver, is still a major point of child trafficking. All of these churches are engaged, especially in the West Coast, in actively trafficking children, especially in the case of the Catholic Church. which has a standing policy that says children are, when they're harmed or trafficked, that crime is not to be told to the police. It's an institutionalized criminal conspiracy to protect child rapists. And in practice, all the other churches do that, but that's a standing policy in the Vatican that, even the quote, present liberal Pope Francis supports. He said, we're a power unto ourselves, we're not accountable to anybody. And, if you look in murderbydecree.com in section 3, we've documented a lot of how this ongoing crime continues. And everything from, there's something called a BFA, Baby for Adoption Protocol in Vancouver hospitals, where if young Catholic girls get pregnant, the priest will target them and identify them. They're put in special homes. There's one called the Maywood Home in South Vancouver. It's still operating. And these young women are brainwashed to give up their child. So they sign away their baby in utero. And as soon as they're born, they're whisked away to adoption agencies because they get a list every year. The Catholic Church gets a quota of babies that are acquired. So it's in-house baby trafficking, just like organ trafficking, child trafficking going on. These churches are protected under the law, the Crown law, and so they can get away with these crimes, as we saw in the case of genocide. So we have a moral obligation to stop that, and we have a legal basis on which to now claim these churches. Now, in terms of public reclamations, there's no better target because the job's already been done. They don't have the right to operate under international law or the law of our republic, and even under Canadian law. The only reason they're allowed to operate is their fellow criminals, the government, absolve them from any crime. But it's like the serial killer appointing his own judge and jury. And the Truth and Reconciliation Commission set up by those criminal bodies, they found themselves free of any liability. Well, no shit, right? I mean, that's what criminals do when they pass judgment on themselves. But we, the people, have an obligation now to pass our own judgment. And that's why it dovetails so beautifully with the reclamation campaign, because both come together. We can reclaim Kanata on the ground, and we can also say, we are not going to allow these genocidal institutions to operate anymore. We're going to reclaim and use their churches, their office buildings. An advantage of that, too, is that in these archives, in the Anglican, Catholic, and United Churches, is stored still a lot of the evidence of what went on in these places. And I remember in London, Ontario, at Huron College, they've got all the records of mass murder in the Southern Ontario residential schools. And we began to surface when we were doing the dig at the Mohawk School in Brantford. And the Chippewa natives have continually tried to get in there to access those records. I remember a researcher, Leona Moses, told us that if those records were ever made public, it would blow away the church. The church would have to shut down because it shows a campaign of mass murder, planned extermination going back several hundred years, planned at the highest levels of power. So, I mean, all of that stuff, by us occupying those, that's something we need to do under international law to access the truth of that. So you can see how all of these things will be a tremendous help to not only our people on the ground to reclaiming Kanata, but it'll be showing to Indigenous people that we're serious, that this isn't about, like Native people continually say to me, how come your book isn't being taught in the curriculum? How come the fact of half our children dying is still not being taught in the schools? You can't be serious about when you say you want a new kind of relationship with us, right? So that's all part of the whole thing. And I think I'm going to leave it at that because it gives us some directions we can go. But we definitely, especially in the West Coast, where, in many ways it was the scene of the crime, there's still so much of that going on out there. We are planning specific campaigns of reclaiming these church buildings and offices and other things. And to do that, we need a broad-based, big movement to support what we're doing, and a lot of training in what that looks like, how we keep our heads, how we do it in a lawful and respectful way, and how we say to the members of those churches, not only do you have to stop contributing money to it, because you're contributing to a crime when you do that, but you should join us. You should help us reclaim these places and enforce the warrants. There's standing arrest warrants against 30 top officials of church and state in Canada. And it's our obligation and the obligation of our Republic sheriffs to enforce those warrants. So to do that, we'd have a much better basis of support to do it. If we're also saying, well, we're seizing the lands and properties of these churches and turning them back to Native people. I mean, one brilliant thing we could do in Vancouver is open up the church and then hand it over to downtown Native people as a sanctuary, because a lot of them are living out and dying on the street. They need to be in those places just to survive. So, I mean, these are all the things we can do one example of how a reclamation campaign could really dovetail well with our whole campaign against genocide and really what the Republic is all about. So I'll leave it at that, but again, refer you to murderbydecree.com. And in there, you look under ITCCS archives, and you'll see a lot of these documents from the tribunal and the common law court and that I was referring to. Thanks, everybody. I'll take questions or whatever.
Kevin, thank you. I think that's a good point, to invite not only the churches, but also to invite the police into what we're, currently developing. So Vanjie had a question, and it was similar to Kirsten's, how do we do it? When we reclaim public buildings, so how do we effectively kind of move in, and how do we keep it ours? Is there documentation, or what would you suggest?
Well, it really depends which building you're talking about. I mean, in the case that we talked about yesterday, it's a building standing empty, and it's relatively easy to do, but then it's easy to have the power cut off on you, right? When you take a building, when you occupy it, you immediately face not only the power being cut off, but the police showing up and ordering you all out because you're illegally trespassing. Well, that's why you've got to pick your target really well. And I would suggest that you can start out small. I mean, to give you an example, when we did the dig at the Mohawk School in Brantford, where we first discovered the bones of children at the residential school mass gravesite there, there was a community center just about 100 yards from the site of the mass grave near the old school. And just before we did that, because the elders, the Mohawk elders who invited me and the Grand River Mohawks, they knew that we were coming. So right before that, they peacefully occupied that community center. And they said, it's now under our jurisdiction. And that's exactly what we need to do within the Republic, our jurisdiction. They non-violently went in. The police didn't dare interfere because they were traditional Mohawks standing on their sovereign identity to do that. And they just took over the building, started operating. And we worked out of there. We had all our meetings there. I slept there, for weeks when we were doing the dig. And it was great. It was done because they had the whole community on their side. And when you have that, it's easy to do, and the police will not intervene. If you have 5 or 10 people go in, you can get thrown out easy, but you need to have a community basis of support. And especially, the importance of taking church buildings is that you then have Native support. Because Native people, not the government chiefs, we're not talking chief and council who are on the take, or they're controlled very much by government money, and they're ordered not to do these things. But we're talking about like the women who are down at the river there, Dena, the traditionalists, the clan mothers, the 3/4 of natives who live on the streets, they don't live on reservation. These natural allies, we've got to involve them in that because their lives depend on it, for one thing, finding those kinds of shelters and that. But also, it's just simple justice. It's like taking back what was taken from them, and really taken from all of us, because none of us own our homes. None of us own anything here. We're all considered squatters on the land by the Crown. So this is what the whole thing of reclamation is, we're reversing that. We say, no, we're not squatters. We're the owners. So anyway, that's a short answer, but we can get into details about that in workshops to train people for these reclamation actions, right? And we're writing up kind of an agenda for that.
So Brandy asks, do you know anything about New Beginnings here in Ontario, where she is?
No.
No. And Dena just wanted to qualify that it's Sunday, December 13th is her beginning that she had put in there. Right. Ernest from New Brunswick says, how do we find record of the common law court case at Brussels? What was the location? Who was present? Was it an ad hoc common law court performed an existing civil law court? He had some questions about that.
Okay. A lot of this has been explained, but I'll repeat it. Murderbydecree.com, under ITCCS archives, you'll see some of the basic documents in court records. The original site, itccs.org, was destroyed. Some of the stuff was lost in 2014. The location initially was in Brussels. It was convened under the auspices of the tribunal, the International Tribunal of Crimes of Church and State. And it then relocated because of threats and disappearances of people who were involved in the court. There were 5 judges including the chief judge, Balthazar Garzon, a former justice from the Spanish court, and 57 citizen jurors linked in 5 different countries by Zoom or by Skype rather. It's not an ad hoc court. It operated according to the rules of evidence, due process, the whole bit. That whole history was documented very well on YouTube. A lot of that is being wiped out and lost. And that's one of the reasons we are, when I find the time, we're in the process of shooting a sequel to Unrepentant, where we go into detail about that whole history, because Unrepentant stopped in 2007. This court case happened and did move mountains after that, but the powers that be moved in quickly to erase the memory of that, and they can do it very effectively. But there's a thread that survived of that whole knowledge and history, and we're going to broaden it out with, because this history is very important. Of course, I often say to people, the proof is in the reality that what happened. When Pope Benedict stepped down, it was right after the Spanish government had issued a diplomatic note to the Vatican on February 6th. He stepped down on the 11th. 5 days before he stepped down, the Spanish government said he could face arrest if he came to Spain based on the evidence they saw on our docket of him signing letters to bishops saying, cover up not only child trafficking and abuse, but the activities of what's known as the Ninth Circle, which is a child sacrificial cult within the Catholic Church, goes back 300 years. Not only he resigned, but 3 other top cardinals, all named in our indictment. That was Adolfo Pichon, the head of the Jesuits, Sean Brady, the Cardinal of Ireland, and Tarcisio Bertoni, the Secretary of State, all of them linked in the Ninth Circle. They were all active participants. Right at the same time, I don't know if you remember that story that surfaced in Ireland about there was a cistern where they found the remains of 800 babies, skeletons, some of them being decapitated, signs of ritual killings. Sean Brady was directly involved in that as Cardinal of Ireland. We forced him out. We within 2 days of that story, us bringing that out, he resigned. I mean, it's all the result of that work we did in the court, right? But immediately there were cover stories put out, the Pope has ill health, all of this stuff they do. And since they have billions of dollars and we don't, it's easy for their version of history to be rewritten. And, but the reality is it was in what happened, and everything that's come out of that since then in terms of this spin doctrine that the present Pope has done, the whole huge industry on child trafficking, and even the discussion of common law. This was not a topic before 2012. If you check the media, some people were talking about common law, but there's a big bandwagon everyone is on now because we proved that common law works in this court system. So ever since 2012, it's safer to talk about common law now, just like it's safe to talk about dead children in Indian residential schools because of what we did. But we, the reality is we're up against a huge adversary. That's why we keep moving locations of the courts. And it's a miracle if any of this stuff ever survives. So that's kind of a long answer to your question, but it's a very important question because it all connects to what we're trying to do right now.
So Brandy just wanted to qualify that New Beginnings is a Christian adoption agency. They're in Ontario. And so Catherine's asking if there's an assembly in Quebec. So do you know of anyone there, Kevin, or maybe?
There's efforts in Quebec to organize assemblies, but I haven't heard anything yet. We have a lot of contacts in Quebec, but no one seems to be willing to kind of take that step right now. People are in a very defensive mode of thinking right now, right? How do I protect myself, right? Not what do we do to establish this? So,
Catherine,
if you're interested, we can connect you up. We have contacts all over.
Maybe Catherine's the leader for Quebec. You asked the question, it's likely you. Kristen says to occupy CBC Halifax. Yeah, that would be a good place. And Dylan wants to speak to reclamation.
Yes, Dylan is here and I'm prepared to say a few words. So first off, Kevin, thank you very much for everything you shared tonight. That's some seriously heavy content, and I'm very glad that my phone was muted because I have a hard time dealing with some of the things you just mentioned, and that's why I'm here. And I'm sure that's why many people are here. So just to talk quickly to logistics, if you've got a call from Ainsley, You may have a missed call in the past couple of days. She's developing a call tree, which is our own emergency network within the assembly. So she will call you. She will give you 3 names of people closest to you in your vicinity. Of those 3 people, they are to connect with 1 or 2 themselves, and then that's your cell. So that's you're at most 9 or 10 people. This is if you want to become part of this, I'm going to fire my email in at the end. You can send it on to me. But again, it's a localized cell network. It's a response to, to cover the emergency stuff, which is very true and real. But again, I like where Kevin's coming from on staying on the proactive and staying on the offensive here. So, but a little more about the cell. So basically, I would recommend that you meet up to do a dry run. And become acquainted with the people in your area, to organize, to think about the logistics behind an emergency situation. This is all very logical stuff. We're working on creating our own emergency broadcast, which actually goes out to everyone in the event of something that would require or substantiate having to reach out to everyone. On a lighter note, and on the offensive, and indirectly related to reclamation, is Kevin had mentioned the library. This is a project I'm working on, as well as I have other potential targets in mind, and I'm doing the groundwork and understanding the legal ramifications and lawful ramifications of taking on such a project, and also building people that are interested in this. Again, email at the end if you're interested in reclamation, which essentially means occupation of public property for the sake of the Republic of Kanata. Please reach out to me. The project in which I've been working on for the past 1.5 weeks is the Christmas tree sale. I've got some details on that now. I'll just speak to that quickly. So rather than being just a Christmas tree sale, it's now a flash Christmas tree Christmas market. So it's more than just trees. It's if you have crafts, if you've got little goodies, if you've got little services that you can sell, it's going to be an information session. It's going to be a reach out to the public reach.
If I could suggest, if you had a flyer or put the details in the chat box. We only have about 20 minutes left to talk about reclamation, but I value, and I so want to kind of, promote the events here locally in Nova Scotia.
Yep, that's right.
If you could put it in the chat box, and then we could.
Okay, so that's right. Well, in the chat box, what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a link to this flash market, which is going to be on Friday at 1 p.m. at the old library. That's what you need to know. I'm going to put the link to the to our network, so we can talk more about it. I'll put all the details in there, and I stand down.
Now, did you have anything to speak about the reclamation? You said you wanted to talk about reclamation. Did you want to?
Yes. So originally, my intent was to deliver notice to the library as a means to begin the process, the lawful process of reclaiming the library, which is kind of I've been looking at all the history of it and all the minutes from the city and really diving into it. It's a pretty complex thing to get into for me to feel, at least personally, to be able to stand on solid ground and say, I deserve to occupy this. Where the church, I feel, it's pretty much a no-brainer. Anyone with any amount of conscience left in them would naturally want to end something like that. From the details Kevin has given tonight, you would want to end something like that. Now, I can sit here and tell you for the next 3 hours everything I learned about the history of the library in Halifax, or I could just let you know that I'm working on it, and I've got a lot of ambition to be part of this reclamation of land and of different properties. I'm looking into it. I'm looking into how to reclaim your own land beyond the threshold of the current system which we live in which your land is registered under the Crown and you pay taxes, but how to circumvent that. So these are all things that I'm working on, and I will deliver more about it. Again, the main thing is Friday, 1 o'clock, the library. This is the event. I want to meet everyone that's on this call. So please show up. Let's fill the place. Let's have it spilling over into the sidewalks. They won't know what to do. And let's talk details. I'm going to put a long description into the network, which is the Mighty Network. It's called the ACLA Mighty Network. I'll send the link here in a second, or near the end of the call. And I stand down.
Great, thank you. Thank you,
Dylan, I just want to say to you that the West Coast Sheriffs are actively planning the whole reclamation thing, and I want to get a call going with you and Andrew as the sheriff and others on the East Coast to talk about what a national reclamation campaign would look like, where we want to target, how to mobilize a whole campaign. So let's do that very soon. We'll hope to do that this week.
And Dylan is our administrator for the Atlantic Common Law Assembly. We just had a few questions about what you had mentioned earlier. Vanjie had a question about the Pope, I guess. What does it mean for him to have resigned and yet he's still living freely in the comforts of the Vatican and probably abusing children? Is this considered a win?
No, in an absolute sense, but it was one of the most unusual things to happen with the history of the Vatican, where a Pope was forced to resign because of being named in a crime. That never happened before. And yeah, you can't achieve the kingdom overnight, but we had a tremendous impact when you think that happened just because of people in grassroots effort doing that. I think it was an enormous victory, and it's still having repercussions. Every time child abuse is talked about now, it's because of that, right? It had an enormous impact. So the way we get people like that dealt with is you go in and get them. You make the citizen arrest. That's why the Republic was set up, so that we can use those kinds of direct means to stop the murder of our children and the trafficking of our children that's going on as we speak, right?
Brent had a question. What are your thoughts on the cyber attack?
Which one?
Maybe the website that you mentioned. I don't know, this question came in a little earlier. But I don't know what we've done here, Brent, with our website, anticipating that it might come down, we remove information, people that register through our website remove that information on a weekly basis, and we download it so we can upload it again if it comes down. But, that's a real thing, cyber attack. A group that is offering a ground force protection for those who bring forth truth. Roberta, I don't know, I see that comment. So if you have any questions or comments, if you could put that in caps, that would be great, just so we identify.
Also, if people want to be part of this reclamation campaign and action, please let us know here, and we'll include you in the Zoom call that'll happen this week between our sheriffs.
And sheriffs, if you wanted to put your connection, and Dylan, if you wanted to put your website, your email address, and just announce who you are so people on the call can sort of see. Dena, if you wanted to put yours. Dena, again, is the administrator for Vancouver Assembly. Kevin, I had a question about the reclamation. Would you have to be a citizen of Kanata? I mean, what are the benefits, though, in being, having Kanata citizenship? Because there's people in our assembly who don't have that citizenship. How do you see that as a benefit with what we're about to do?
It's a real line of defense. Every time I've used my citizenship card with a cop, they do nothing. They back off because they recognize that I'm not in their jurisdiction. So if you have a whole group of you who are standing in the jurisdiction of the Republic, they can't touch you. It gives you a lot of protection on the ground. And, that's the main advantage in terms of the reclamation thing. But it means you can vote in the upcoming constitutional convention. You can be a delegate. You can offer amendments to the different documents that are posted that hopefully a lot of you have. So, I mean, it just creates more of an equal playing field for everybody if we're all in the same, kind of effort. But.
So we had a question in our meeting on the weekend, could you don't have to be a member of Kanata, you can still sort of maintain your membership under the Atlantic Common Law Assembly, but, it's an option, is that right?
That's right. Yeah, we're not forcing anyone. It's a serious decision to take out citizenship, because it isn't simply send me my card, now I'm safer. It's you take on a responsibility. You have to defend and build up the Republic. You have to defend each other, and that's what being a citizen means. You're taking responsibility. So it's a serious step, and you should look through all the material before you decide to join.
Vanjie said, is the market this Friday? So I just like to share a story about that. One of our members, Anastasia, took it upon herself to do an outreach where she delivered the national laws that were passed September 8th to the market owner at the Halifax Forum. So this is like an arena where there's all organic farmers. She was denied service the week before because she didn't have a mask. So myself and a few friends, Sammy and Anastasia and another lady, went in, delivered the laws, and we were met with a lot of resistance, of course, from the farmers who ordered us out and were very upset and called the police, and 3 police cars showed up for the 3 or 4 of us. So we had a police car each, and the officer had asked for my ID, and I said, I really don't use my corporate ID anymore, but I do have this citizen ID from Kanata, and I'm not really under the regulations of, that corrupt corporate Canada. So I don't think you can do anything to me right now, but I'd love to have your card, because I think we'll meet again. So I think you're right that, being able to say you're in a different nation is a powerful stance. It's not just in Atlantic Canada. This is, nationwide. So the bigger the group, the more powerful the impact. So I had practice with that. I'm practicing. So we're not going to be at the market. Vanjie, we have a plan for Costco parking lot sometime coming up soon. So if you could connect with Anastasia is on the call. If you could put your email in there, it's kind of a neat plan. And we took the directive in here from last week, and we're kind of reprogramming it to do something a little different this week.
Dena, I would like to speak.
I noticed.
Just one moment, Michelle.
Dena, I would like to speak.
Okay, if you could just give us one moment.
As a French person.
Okay.
As a francophone person, I would like to say, I heard an innuendo about Quebec with nobody that speaks French that acts like you know what's happening there. So I would like to say, Quebec has reclaimed many churches. They've become part of the cégep. You look at a lot of doorways. They ripped down the churches to make community colleges. So we have kicked out the church a long time ago. And I would like to say we're not following English law. And we are a nation. Quebec people are a nation. They're not going to join the Republic. They are a nation. So
we should clarify that. We should clarify what we mean by the Republic. When we say the Republic, as we say in relation to Native people, it's a federation of nations. So it'd be a federation of the Quebec nation, the English Canadian nation, and the Indigenous nations. That's why we have 3 stars, 3 separate nations within a federation. Okay. My comment about Quebec was that I'm talking about not Quebecers generally, but those who have shown interest in the Republic haven't taken that next step yet. And I'm sure it's for a lot of reasons I don't understand, but it wasn't meant as a slur on people in Quebec.
No, you just don't speak French. Nobody speaks French. There's no French invitation.
Well, maybe you can help us with that. Why don't you help us with that,
I would like to.
Okay, let's work together on that.
Meeting.
Good.
Yeah, cool.
Let's work on that. I need your help in terms of a strategy for Quebec. I'd like to talk to you about that.
Brandy has thank you for that, Michelle.
Yeah, thank you.
We have about 10 minutes left, so we've got a few more questions to get through. But would you recommend visiting the reserve there in her area about reclamation? So,
Oneida? No, because you haven't been invited in, so you should never walk in to anyone's territory if you're not invited. B, if you go onto a reservation, that's a mini police state that makes Canada look mild. They're run as concentration camps by chief and council at the behest of the Crown. It's the last place you want to talk to people on reservations, or it's a dangerous way to go. You've got to find another way to meet people. I know I'm painting a broad brush there. Not all reservations are like that, but by and large, 9 out of 10 are like that. And so I wouldn't do that. Walk in cold, get to know some Native people, talk off reserve. That's where most of them are anyway, and understand kind of the nuances better, because it's you can't break in from the outside very easily, nor should you.
So Sammy says she still wants cards. So yeah, Kirsten, if you wanted to put your information in there, Kirsten is our Kanata card lady locally. She can help you with that. What was the international court in Brussels? Was it dissolved, says Esther?
Yeah. Yeah, courts are, common law courts are only convened for a case and then they're dissolved. They're not permanently sitting courts. The court was convened a second time. There was a second case brought against the present Pope and Adolphe Pichon, the head of the Jesuits. And that was in 2014. But since then, the International Common Law Court hasn't convened, although their research teams and judges are still active with us. In fact, they were consultants in setting up the Republic and doing other work recently.
So Vanjie, Anastasia put her information in there for Costco. Wayne Plantes is in there. Was the international court? Oh, okay. We already answered the question. So there were a few questions that came in. One was from Stephen. It's not really about reclamation, but about consent forms. So Stephen, if you're on the call, which I think you are, you can qualify it, but he asked about approaching businesses and signing consent forms. Apparently the dentist wanted him to sign a consent form. If you had any thoughts about that, and how do we approach businesses with common law?
Well, you know, Paul has been working a lot on the whole small business approach. Maybe you should speak to Paul, because I'm sure he's thought more about that. My mind right now is very focused on the whole reclamation issue, but maybe Paul, if you're there, maybe you can communicate with him about that.
You could put your information there. Well, do you have any thoughts? We have about 5 minutes left in the hour. If you can go a little later, that's great. But do you have any other thoughts, Kevin, on the reclamation? Any advice, paperwork, what not to do?
Well, yeah, it's got to be community-based. It's got to have people with a vested interest in doing it, and it needs organization and planning. So it isn't something you can just run off and do, because I think Chris earlier on in a comment said the first one you try has got to be done effectively, or they can come back with, you know, a legal response. They can make you look really bad, like you're a bunch of quote terrorists seizing buildings. I mean, the whole thing is that we are doing this in a lawful manner that's a benefit to people, not, you know, the stereotype that they like to impose on folks like us. Anyway, there's going to be more details to that. We're going to be working on a proposal that we'll share with everybody to actually set up committees in different areas to work on this and actually plan where to go and how to do it. And these kickoff events in December, I think it's really important. Let's have parties. Like, we're going to hold an event in Vancouver. And it's going to be music, food. We're going to have you know, those dunk tanks where you dunk somebody in the water. Bonnie Henry is the medical czar in British Columbia, right? So we're going to have hit Bonnie Henry and dump her in the tub for $5 kind of thing, right? So make it really funny and have just a mass defiance of the regulations, because on Christmas, and that's going to piss a lot of people off. So let's use that and say, okay, let's hold these social events, gatherings, music, and everything every or so, and build up people's support. Because once you have that, then you can build on that to say the next step is we take back these buildings, we open them as, you know, for our assemblies. It's a practical question. Where are we going to hold the assemblies in the courts? I think these churches are an ideal place to do them. They've got a lot of property standing empty right now, and they're criminal bodies. We need to go in and take it, and I think we can do it very, very lawfully.
So just with Stephen's question about the consent forms, just not sign any consent forms, right? I mean, then you're signing onto their rules and regulations. So that was
basically, yeah.
And somebody
Don't
had
sign
mentioned
anything ever.
Somebody had mentioned earlier about, you know, coordinating across Kanata and having kind of that certain day where we all do an event. And you had mentioned on a convener call that we'd done about flag raising. You know, do you have any thoughts? I mean, if December 13th, Dena is going to do that out in Vancouver and have a party, maybe we look at doing something, you know, in our other assemblies too at that time.
It's a great idea. And Vancouver has a flag now, finally. I handed one of the flags over to them. And I'm going to mail the flag to you, Dena. And it's really good. The flag raising is part of these ceremonies because it's a symbol of what reclamation is. Okay, this is now under the jurisdiction of the Republic. This is a very important symbol. It has great meaning for a lot of people to see a new flag hanging there, right? And you walk into the church offices and say, we've reclaimed these buildings in the name of the Republic. All the children you've murdered, get out. That's exactly what we're going to do. So the flag raising is a big part of that.
So any other questions on reclamation? Thank you, Michelle, for that. How about 15 minutes of what's happening in French culture? And maybe you can connect with Kevin and we could do maybe a section on that, you know, English and French, and how that, you know, because that seems like a more than a 15-minute conversation. So Kevin put his information in there, angelfire101protonmail.com. So if you and he wanted to kind of connect, and then we could do a presentation, maybe we could devote a whole Zoom to that, you know, our Federation of Nations. That would be
essential.
Yeah.
And I appreciate your raising to Michelle, and we got to avoid misunderstandings and really understand what we're each saying. So let's do that first, and then discussion on what a federation looks like. What's the relationship between English Canada, Quebec, and the Indigenous nations? Because that's at the foundation of everything we're trying to do here. So let's do it.
And the person who was asking about the Quebec, I'm just trying to find her name, Christine, I think it was. Michelle, if you wanted to put your email in there or your number of how she could connect with you, she's looking for some information on Quebec, so maybe you can share with her. Tara, who's our legal justice, says, should we capitalize on the barbecue lockdown fines in Etobicoke? Maybe get a common law agent up there to help with no fines. So Paul had mentioned that earlier, Tara, and I think was going to post some information. What do you think about that, Kevin? Should we capitalize? Remember the story Paul told earlier about the guy with the barbecue?
Yeah, no, I think I'm going to contact everyone we know in Toronto and get them down there and just get support to the guy, right?
Great. And Brandy says, just want to thank you both very much for inviting me and taking time to share this important information. You're welcome, Brandy. And Catherine, so Michelle is right underneath you there. Michelle, you're responding to me privately. So if you could put that, put your comments to the whole group, and if you wanted to share, tri-language meetings are the only way. So I don't speak much French, so we're gonna need you and your French translation. The ACLL Secretary Dylan has a final thought to share. Did you want to come on, Dylan?
Yes, just very quickly. I just wanted to share that I spoke personally with a police officer and an RCMP officer today, and that we're in good hands. You wouldn't believe the kind of I have a lot of personal connections into police, military, just from my background, and we're not in a bad place. I just want you guys, just want to leave that note. And one other final thought: as the secretary, I need to liaison with other common law groups. I'm taking action on that, and I've got meetings set up with Earth United and other groups. However, if you know key people or secretaries in other common law groups, if you are already connected with other common law groups, please connect with me, and I'll put my email again one more time, and I will reach out to them on behalf of the Atlantic Common Law Assembly. Thank you.
Thank you, Dylan. Esther,
just a word. Oh, just a word on that, Dylan. Earth, hell of a lot. I know that they did come out on their website attacking me personally and the whole idea of the Republic. So you might want to get some where that's coming from. I'd be happy to speak to anyone to clarify any of that. But
yes, I actually I'm connecting with Jesse Casanova directly. I just got his WhatsApp today, so yeah, I'll deal with that.
So Dena, I wanted to end the way you started, and just a little eulogy for two of the guys who were involved in our reclamation actions in Vancouver who died because of it. And that was Bingo Dawson. He was a survivor of school. He led the occupations of the churches, beaten by a Vancouver cop so badly he died 2 days later. And William Coombs, of course, who took part in the occupations, he saw the abduction of the children by Queen Elizabeth who never came back. He died of lethal injection in St. Paul's Hospital. Two fellows who died for our vision of Kanata and justice. So I want to hold up them of many, many who have fallen in this battle. Thanks.
Thank you, Kevin. Thank you. And thank you all for being on the call. Any final questions, comments for Kevin before we sign out? Do we know the topic for next week's assembly? The topic, maybe that's internally for Dena. Thank you, Badera, for joining us from the UK. Thank you, Michelle, for your information. Leo Glavine is somebody who Michelle recommends. He was the previous health minister in Nova Scotia. I sent out an email to all the MLAs and the MPs and the police last week with some of the information, asking them questions, really. I asked if all the government officials were privy to the quarantine centers, like Randy Hillier had been discussing. I asked if the PCR test, is a hoax, as Dr. Roger Hodgkin says, and what we're finding in the UK, that they haven't been able to identify the virus. Why is it being used as a diagnostic tool? And also, are you aware of the unlawful measures with the PCR test? Because the Portuguese court has ruled it unlawful. So I sent that out last week to everyone. Gerald in New Brunswick just told me he sent a notice of liability to the Premier of New Brunswick, Blaine Hicks, and that's on our Telegram Mighty Network site. So maybe we can follow your lead, Gerald, with that. I mean, we have all the information and science right now, and I haven't gotten a reply, but maybe we can talk about that, Kevin. And thank you, Gerald, for sharing that on their Mighty Network. So connections to other assemblies. Dylan puts his information up there then. Dena, again, is from the Vancouver Assembly. And I think that might be all we have there. So again, thank you all for being here. And I would like to close with a quote from two of our members, Klaus and Shirley. We can gain our common ground by inspiring others with the richness of common law. We are the people whose heart beat the true record of mankind and our right relationship with God, with each other, and with our nation. So I think with all the chaos in the world right now, we have to kind of keep that in our hearts and minds as we move forward. So thank you, Kevin, for being here.
Sure.
Thank you
Anytime.
all.
Thanks, everyone. Carry it on.
We'll see you next week, same time, same place.
Take care, everyone.
Thanks, Dena.
Thank you.
Thank you.
See you guys.
Thank you.
Good night.
Night.